Welcoming to the studio one of the Conservatives' heavy hitters who's yet to declare who she will be supporting to be the new leader of the party after that calamitous defeat at the election. I speak of Suella Braverman, who of course served as Home Secretary, Attorney General and even Brexit Minister as well, yet to say who is she's going to lend her support. I was going to say the race to be Conservative. It's harder a race. It's not even a jog. It seems to have taken forever. Suella Braverman, thank you for coming to the studio. Who have you got your eye on to be the next leader of the Conservative Party?
Morning, Nick. Well, listen, this has been a very long race, as you put it.
It's a race, is it? I don't know.
And the candidates have displayed a lot of stamina to keep going. And both the candidates are really high-quality people. Actually, both Kemi and Robert have both stepped up because they feel a duty to our party and a duty to our country. And they both recognise the challenges that we face. And
what are those? What before you reveal who it is you're... Talk me through that. I use the word calamitous. What went wrong and how is it to be put right?
Yeah. Well, we let people down on key policy promises, notably immigration, whether that's legal immigration and the unprecedented number of visas, whether it's stopping the boats. We said we'd do whatever it would take to stop the boats. We didn't. Whether it's on taxation, we oversaw a 70-year high when it came to the tax burden. We subscribed to ludicrous net zero policies, which are punishing and crippling small businesses and householders around the country. We didn't invest enough in defence. We allowed the NHS to get bloated and inefficient. I mean, I could go on. There are many failures. So on policy, we did let the people down, and we didn't speak their language. We didn't address some of the common sense issues with bravery that we should have. I should just say I am proud of elements of our track record over the last decade on the economy. You know, we did get inflation down. We did get millions of people back into work compared to 2010. We slashed the deficit. And
education standards went up as well. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you did.
Exactly. So it's
the
not
list
all
you
bad,
gave is pretty compelling, Suella Braverman.
Yes.
So were you not surprised by the scale of defeat, or did the scale of it surprise you?
Well, I'd been warning, unfortunately, like a bit of a broken record for months, that we were heading to a very bad outcome. I think back in the spring when we had the local elections, I was one of the few voices who said, listen, we've got to change course because we're heading to a wipeout and there's still time. We could still have redeemed the situation, but my advice was ignored. But I did see this coming, and I've seen it coming for over a year now. I tried to warn. Many of us tried to warn. Our warnings fell on deaf ears.
And just lastly, before we do hear who you think is the future of the party, if we speak about the current leader, there is a school of thought now that had he delayed, had he gone a little bit later, the Conservatives might have been in a better position, and he almost, I read, took the decision himself, Rishi Sunak, to go early. Your take on that, Suella Braverman?
I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I wasn't in government at the time. So it's very difficult. I think on balance, had Rishi Sunak waited a bit longer, things may have gotten better. Definitely on the economy, we might have had an interest rate cut. We would have seen further falls on inflation. However, on the critical issue of the boats, as I was predicting around about this time last year, I didn't feel that his plan was going to work. And perhaps that also dawned on Rishi Sunak in the spring, whereby he realised that his plan wasn't going to work and we would not have got flights off in the summer, and we would have still had a summer of thousands of people coming in illegally into the country. I don't know. But my assessment at the time was that the plan was not robust enough.
So that was then. This is now. Come on, Suella Braverman, who will you be supporting?
Well, one thing that's very exciting after a couple of years of decline and failure is that we are about to start a new chapter. We're going to turn the page on that failure and we're going to move forward with a new leader. And as I say, and I do want to emphasise this, either of the candidates will do a good job, I'm sure of that. For me, as I've just said, immigration, I think, has been the defining issue for our politics in this country, but also for the West, actually. We're dealing with a global migration crisis. And as a Conservative Party, we've been grappling with this issue for several years now. And I think there's one candidate who does stand out through maybe I've given it away, his conviction by resigning on principle from the cabinet over the government's failure to deliver on immigration, but also through his subsequent plans and observations on how we actually address the problem. as to why I'm supporting him. And because Robert Jenrick has been robust on leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, which I believe is the root cause of our failure to stop the boats, because he's committed to an unequivocal cap on visas to turn the tide on unprecedented legal migration, he has my vote.
OK. Was he always the man? Or has that been informed from listening to the 2 that was 3 that was 4 that was 5 at the very beginning? Or was he always going to be your choice, do you think?
Listen, I've been watching the contest closely, and I know all of the candidates, and they were all speaking in very compelling terms about a variety of issues, actually. But for some time, I've been very keen to support Robert, because I do think that he offers the most compelling plan on how we rebuild trust with those millions of people who abandoned us at the general election. There are 4 million voters, our core voters, lifelong Conservatives. I met many thousands of them during the campaign who said to me with a forlorn look on their faces, "I've been a lifelong Conservative, Suella, but you've let me down over immigration, and I'm going to vote for reform."
How can you be confident the battle is to be won on the extremes, though? Is the battle not to be won in the centre? Because Mr. Jenrick does it, I'm sure you would agree, does represent more the right side, the right-wing side of your party. Do you accept that?
Well, I actually find these labels a little bit tired, to be honest. I mean, I think...
He's not a centrist, is he, like, say, Tom Tugendhat?
Well, Robert himself would say that he's actually been on a political journey. He started off as someone who could have been described as a centrist from a different wing of the party. He voted for Remain, if we want to use that label, back in 2016. He would say, and I saw this with my own eyes when we worked together at the Home Office, he really went on a journey when he saw close up the profound and systemic problems when it came to controlling our borders. I don't describe his position now as, extreme, I think is the word you use. I describe it as the common ground. I describe it as the reasonable and necessary position that we need to take if we are to prove to people that we're serious about tackling immigration after years of failure.
But he's only just had a Damascene conversion about the ECHR, hasn't he? I remind you of a piece you wrote, or that was written, concerning you in The Spectator earlier this year, where you said, Suella Braverman, "I remember talking to Jenrick about leaving the ECHR a year ago and him looking horrified by that prospect. It's really good he's moving in a different direction. Wasn't that the story he was sent by Rishi to keep an army in the Home Office?" So a little than a year ago, he didn't even believe in leaving the ECHR, Suella Braverman.
As I said, and I think Robert would himself agree, he has changed his view through working on the front line of controlling our borders. We work very closely.
He was a big kind of centrist Rishi supporter, is what you told The Spectator.
Exactly what we've just said now. And I think Robert himself would agree that he has, I think he uses the term himself, radicalised by the facts. He has seen how profound and deep-seated the problems are. We cannot deport foreign drug dealers. We cannot deport foreign terrorists. We cannot deport foreign paedophiles because of their human rights. And I've worked on this issue not just as Home Secretary, but as Attorney General before that, and also as a barrister specialising in the area before that. I am absolutely and utterly convinced that the way we solve this problem to control our borders and enable the government to deport those people who shouldn't be here, which is what the British people would expect, is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and to deliver our own domestic framework of human rights that properly protects the British people.
Lastly on this, you opponents would say that puts us on the same footing as countries such as Russia and Belarus, that we leave the ECHR. Are you happy to be seen on that sort of level, Suella Braverman?
Disagree entirely with that characterisation.
Well, that is true that they both left.
Well, it also puts us on the same page as the United States of America, Australia, New Zealand and Canada.
Well, they wouldn't be in the European Convention on Human Rights.
But they are all common law countries which manage largely to control their laws and their borders without subscribing and subjugating themselves to a foreign court. The problem we have here is we've got a court in Strasbourg which doesn't align to the values of the British people. We saw in June 2022 when the flights were grounded on the tarmac, when we tried to get flights off to Rwanda. We've just seen the Italians now try a similar scheme of outsourcing their immigration system and sending people to Albania. They've been stopped by human rights laws. In a whole manner of areas, largely with immigration, but in many other areas as well, like police powers, like protest laws.
Yeah.
The human rights laws flowing from the European Convention have been distorted by a foreign court in a way that undermines our national security and public safety.
Do you think Americans feel in control of their borders?
No, I agree.
With
Listen,
Mexico?
Listen, what I'm saying,
But you
that they've
just
got a
said
problem. They've got a problem with their borders as well. But what I'm saying is we have a foreign court here applying an out-of-date charter on human rights, and it's become politicised. The court has become interventionist, and it's undermined our ability to apply our own laws. And I would say the comparisons with Russia and Belarus are misguided. I far prefer to think about the vast majority of countries around the world who are not party to the European Convention on Human Rights and do manage largely to manage their laws and their borders.
Suella, you and I have been speaking for years. You know that there's a considerable listenership here who is interested in conservative affairs. You're probably aware that Robert Jenrick is happy to come and have a head-to-head debate on LBC at the moment. The blockage seems to be with the other candidate, Mrs. Badenoch. How important is it that they put themselves in front of scrutiny where they will take calls from the listeners and be held to account? How important is that?
I think it's really important, particularly at this phase during the leadership contest. Now's the time when we can probe and test and see how the candidates respond. Now's the time to ask those difficult questions. No good projecting onto candidates, assuming that they're going to do something when actually they may not do it once in office. So the more debate, the more inquiry that can be carried out of the candidates, the better. All
right, just before I let you go, you were Home Secretary in 2022 when the Chris Cabba story first took place and Sergeant Martin Blake had to take the decision to stop Cabba in the way by discharging his firearm. You'll know now that it took a jury less than 3 hours to clear the sergeant of murder. Your reaction to that case, the involvement of the IOPC and the Crown Prosecution Service as a former Home Secretary and indeed former Attorney General?
Yeah. I mean, at the outset, I just want to say that someone has lost his life.
Yep.
And there's a human element, and my condolences go to the family and friends of Chris Cabba. And the Sergeant Blake, who was put through this ordeal, deserves our admiration and apology, frankly, because these charges for murder should never have been brought against him. A serving firearms officer, they volunteer to do that role. They are specialist. They are extremely judicious with the way that they exercise their decision-making powers. And it's extremely rare that we have these kinds of incidents. He was acting in the line of duty, in self-defence, and in genuine fear for his safety and that of his fellow officers at the time. The fact that it took the jury a very short time to acquit him unanimously is very telling. And I think many questions need to be asked about why these charges were brought.
Should the charge ever have been brought?
In my view, and now I can speak now that we've concluded the legal process, I don't think they should have been brought. This sergeant was a very brave and courageous member of our police force. And, they are taking split-second decisions, making extremely difficult judgments that I definitely wouldn't be able to make.
Indeed.
Under pressure, life or death decisions. They are not setting out to kill people deliberately. They are setting out to keep the public safe and to catch criminals. And for them to end up in the dock when they are just doing their job totally undermines confidence in them. And so I want to put on record my thanks to those brave firearms officers. We value them. We need them, but we do need to, if necessary, change the system so that they know that they are protected and enabled in that very difficult job.
Last question. You mentioned judgment. Can I question your judgment in a story in one of the papers today? Suella Braverman forwarded government documents to her private email accounts on at least 127 occasions while serving as a minister in a possible breach of the code. Why did you do that, Suella Braverman?
Oh, well, listen, it's quite tedious to explain, but the reality is that a lot of that was during COVID and a lot of it was working from home. And I did use my personal email on occasions. I would say nothing was there of a national security character. It's all matters to do with the work of Attorney General. And it's sometimes quite difficult
You couldn't access your government website from your home then? Is that what you're saying?
No, you can't access your government email account on a home laptop, no. You can't do that. But you have a ministerial laptop, you have a ministerial phone, and sometimes that's very difficult.
So you could take that with you to your home?
Yeah, you could take that with you. But that's actually very That's not very practical when you are reading a lot of documents online and you simultaneously need to write lengthy documents and pieces as part of your work. Sometimes you need 2 screens. So it's a bit tedious as an explanation. There's nothing to do with spies or state secrets here. It's just that
you didn't transfer any sensitive
No, there was
material.
nothing sensitive that was transferred. It was literally a way to enable me to view documents on one screen and simultaneously type on another screen so that I could explain my views
With
to
hindsight,
those people.
would you do it again?
Listen, I was never actually advised that that was not permissible. And we were in a strange scenario where a lot of that was done during COVID and lockdown, when there was a lot of working from home and I wasn't getting as many papers in physical copy.
But your colleagues on the front bench weren't doing this, were they?
Well, if you look back at the records, there have been some of my colleagues who have been found to be using their personal emails many years ago. I'm not going to name any names, but you can find that out as well. So it's not particularly unusual, I would say, amongst ministers when we've done that.
You would be able to be trusted with a senior brief again?
Oh, listen. I'm not looking for any senior brief. I'm here. I'm just very excited about the fact that we are turning a new chapter, starting a new chapter for the party. We are going to move on from the years of difficulty that we've had, and the new leader, whoever he or she may be, I know will do a good job of kind of putting a good team together, getting us back on track, taking the fight to Labour, exposing the damage that this horrible Labour government is doing to our country. We're sitting in the chamber and we see them.
170 odd seat majority. What's the best Conservatives can hope for when we all go to the polls again? The best.
Oh goodness, I'm not going to be.
They can't win, can
predicting this far out of a general election. I want us to win. I do believe we can win.
How important
I've never seen any government of any stripe collapse so quickly as this one has. In 100 days, we've got scandals, we've got broken promises, and we've got mismanagement and incompetence. We could make it up.
Suella Braverman, thank you for coming by the studio, declaring that it is Robert Jenrick who will have the former Home Secretary's support on LBC.